We'll call to order the special meeting Friday, August 30th, 2024 for the Island Transit Board. Do roll call first. Craig, you want to start?
Yes, Craig Sear, I'm present.
Okay. Matt,
I'm here.
okay, Melanie,
I'm here.
Janet up there? Janet, are you the phone? Okay, in the room, Eric.
Here.
Jenny Brad.
Yeah.
Lance.
That's like, oh, is it Lance?
Yes.
I'm here.
Okay, great, Lance, thank you. Gonna do staff or you don't need it further. Okay, great. Do we have any additions or changes to the agenda? We can't because it's a special meeting, so we want to approve the agenda.
Do we have a quorum?
We have Jenny, Melanie, Craig, Eric, Jill.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Okay.
506.
Is there an approval of the agenda? Motion by Eric, second by Jenny to approve the agenda as presented. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Our first item and only item is, a public hearing on the 6-year 2024 through 2029 Transit Development Plan. You're gonna present, we'll ask questions and then.
Yeah, so at this point, the hearing is open to public comment. If anybody from the public would like to make comments on this plan.
So what I think would be, if I could make a suggestion.
Yes, ma'am.
Walk us through the highlights of the plan and then open it up for the public comment.
All right. So today we are here to discuss and approve the 2024 to 2029 Transit Development Plan for Island Transit. This is a document required under state guidelines that we do an annual update to that shows the anticipated plans that the transit agency are going to undertake over the next 6 years. This plan is amendable during the year, should we need to do that. That's about a 2-month process. So we can do that. And again, there are annual updates to this plan. So this is something that, you know, changes a lot from year to year, or can change a lot from year to year. This is the agency's submission to the Regional Transportation Improvement Plan. And it has to be submitted by September 1st of each year under state regulation. This is our submission to the Regional Transportation Improvement Plan. Any grants that we want to go after at either a state or a federal level, those projects must be included in our plan to be eligible for state or federal funding. So we have had this out for a public comment period. The public comment period, we did not receive any comments from the public. We did receive 2 sets of comments from staff, from Meg Hefner, as well as Paul Arand, our finance manager. And those comments were incorporated. We also received 1 comment from Commissioner St. Clair. It was not directly related to the TDP. She wanted to inquire as to when we would be engaging in changes over on Camino Island. And for the sake of the board's information, that is probably going to be targeted towards the May service change in 2025 is when we'll undertake some changes that have been requested on Camino Island. That is a, without going through this and reading it verbatim, that is the highlights of this year's plan.
Are there any questions about the plan?
Oh, and Commissioner St. Clair is signing in.
Oh, great.
Right now.
I was just gonna see if we had questions first, then I'll. Okay, and then we'll open up the public hearing on the 6-year 2024 through 2029 Transit Development Plan. So are there any members of the public that wish to comment, speak, congratulate? We take positive feedback.
And then
Anybody in the room? Third and final call for public comment on the public hearing. Okay, at this time, we'll close the public hearing portion of the 6-year transportation development plan. Is there any, we'll move into our business item. Item number 1. Consideration of adoption of the 6-year transportation development plan.
Brad asked some questions for you. Appropriate?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. Just looking at what we were presented at the first of the month compared to what we've got now, the org chart appears to have changed. We have rather than a financial controller underneath the executive director, we have a construction project manager. We went from 2 operations supervisors to 3 operations supervisors. From 5 road support supervisors to 7 road support supervisors. Why the increase in staff? Why did the org chart change? One, why the increase in staffing? Does that increase in staffing budget as well?
Thank you, sir, for that question. Most of those were to correct errors that we detected in the transit development plan. So we currently have 5 road support supervisors on the Whidbey side. We forgot to count the 2 that are at Camino.
Okay.
So we added those in, and so that's our 7 road support supervisors.
Okay.
The operations supervisors, again, there's 2 here in the house, in the Whidbey house. We did not count Troy Fair over on Camino, so that's where that position had to change.
Okay.
The construction project manager and the finance manager, Craig, do you want to speak to those changes as they were organizational changes?
Yes, we did speak, let's see, so as far as finance, Paul Arend retains his title as the controller, and he leads the finance organization. And with regard to operations and maintenance, we've had a restructuring there. And Tom Eichley has assumed the role of construction project manager. Will Vogelman and Pete Schrum are managing maintenance and facilities.
So is that a bump up for him then from where he was at?
Who's he?
Tom?
It's a sideways lateral move, reorganization. Tom's an individual contributor now.
No budget impact, in other words.
No budget impact.
The other question I have for you is during the planned activities in 2026, we're scheduled to begin construction of South Liberty Transit Center and modifications to the Kuko operating base. But it's solely in 2026. It doesn't look like it continues into 27, 28, 29. I assume those projects are not going to be a one and done type of project. I don't see any proposed end dates or continuation of those projects in planned activities.
That is correct, and we should, and we can in future years adjust that. The more important part is we really haven't gone through the design and engineering, so I didn't want to list it as a multi-year project without having an engineer telling me how long the project is going to take, because we just haven't initiated that, so I don't have a basis to establish a time frame. But I did know that we would want to start it after the completion of the design phase, so that puts it into 2026.
Will we be doing procurement implementation of new and upgraded electronic timekeeping, dispatching, and scheduling modules for all 5 years? Is that going to be a 5-year project?
It won't be a 5-year project. Well, it could. So some of these bullets are broad because if you list out every single project that you might spend federal or state funds, because you get federal operating funds and that can get distributed into a lot of smaller projects. So
Yeah.
some of these bullet points are larger kind of catch-alls.
Okay.
And that's one of them. For this year in 2024, we have purchased a new dispatching software from a company called Passio. That is in the implementation phase right now and should be up and operational before the end of the year, at which time we'll be discontinuing the route match software that we have. That'll be a net savings to the agency because currently route match costs us $220,000 a year on annual licensing fees. The Passio system will cost $50,000 in annual licensing fees. So that will be a good one. So that's an example of how this bigger bullet point kind of affects the day-to-day and covers some of the day-to-day operations.
Under vehicle purchases for 2024 to 2029, we are showing that there seems to be some discrepancy between this page and the following page, and maybe you can help me to understand. I'm on page 26 and 27. On 27, it appears as if we will be purchasing the rideshare 21 7 to 8 passenger, 12 passenger, 20 12 passenger, and 3 15 passenger vehicles. Is that accurate?
That will probably end up getting spread out through the biennium. But we wanted to list that in there because we're gonna be going for grant funds on those. The rideshare numbers on the chart on page 26 are probably a little more accurate for how we would actually procure the vehicles. But we're gonna go for a grant here this fall. Well, actually, rideshare grants are due in January of 25. And so that's what we'll apply for the next biennium.
That's a significant difference. You have 44 vehicles for 2025 under rideshare. However, we only have 9 on page 26.
So we still have the ability to adjust that. And so we can adjust that before we file today.
I can explain why there's so many listed on 2025, is that when I just looked at the fleet and saw which vehicles were expiring
Mhm.
in terms of either years or mileage.
Mhm.
And so those would be the number of vehicles that ideally we would want to replace. And it would create the bucket, you might say, that we could go to WisDOT and say, yeah, this is what we would really want to do. But we realistically know that we can't write a grant for 44 vehicles. So I think the previous page is more of that realistic picture of what we are definitely planning on ordering, for WisDOT, but we were still allowing for the opportunity if we want to go ahead and apply for more vehicles by stating it here, because we need to state whatever we could possibly order. So we have to give ourselves the opportunity. And that number was created based on the remaining useful life of the vehicles we currently have.
How many rideshare vehicles do we currently have?
We have 31 in revenue service. I'm not sure how many spares that we have, I believe. And then that also covers our RideLink fleet, which is a few more on top of that. So that would be close to, I would say 2/3, if not a majority of our fleet, the 44.
So I guess one of the issues I have with that is in the previous pages, when we talk about our facilities and our rolling stock, it's purchase replacement vehicles according to this schedule on page 26, which is here. And then we have a significant difference when it comes to page 27. And it looks like we're trying to, potentially could be replacing the majority of our stock in 2025 based upon this capital improvement program. Then in addition, the numbers have changed significantly too from what we were presented in the draft in terms of like 40-foot hydrogen vehicles, buses rather. Originally for 2026, we had 16 million, now we have 4 million. Then we had 5 million for 2027, that's up to 9 million. So these numbers have changed quite a bit. The one that really has changed, that's troublesome for me, is we went from 35 million in 2026 for facilities up to 40 million. And from 5 million on other equipment to 10 million.
Yeah, and
Based on what?
Well, that is the submissions, from Tom, and he's not present. Craig, can you speak to that?
I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty hearing the back and forth. Can you
So
repeat that?
The question presented was, in some of the outlying years, our original draft, the difference from our original draft is that the cost on capital facilities has increased dramatically. Can you discuss why that was? I know there was some moving around after the finance committee, had the last meeting.
I can speak to that.
Oh, Paul's gonna speak to that.
There was a shift, from 25 to 26. There was a proposal made for significant, I think it was as much as $22 million to rework this facility, and that was taken out of 2025 and pushed out into the future for further discussion. So that was the biggest ticket item.
Now, and for the sake of the board members, when we do a transit development plan, 2024 and 2025 are required to be what's called fiscally constrained. So they need to be tied to a realistic expectation of the revenue and expenditures that you need to have. Future years are allowed to be a parking lot of ideas, is the way I've often heard it described. They do not have to be fiscally constrained, and that allows transit agencies to get things on the capital improvement program. And if funding becomes available now through a grant program, or say we were successful through a federal grant or something like that, we are allowed to move these projects forward to one of the current years, to either 24 or 25, because funding has become available. So some of this in future years is just a parking lot of projects.
Why the almost doubling of other equipment for 2025?
I can't speak to that budget preparation. Paul, are you aware of what was put in that line item?
Yeah, I have a list here. Capital equipment. The items I have listed here is water purification system, 1.1 million, hydrogen storage, 7 million. Security camera upgrade, 200,000, security gates, 1.1 million. And it's a small machine for 15,000. Display panels for real-time info, 200,000, Passio installation, 250,000, shelters, 250,000. So there are a number of projects that have been put out there. And as, sort of based, there's input of things that people are interested in putting forward for the agency.
Janet, oh, Eric, were you done? Sorry.
No, no, not yet, I'm sorry.
Eric's still going,
Yeah,
Janet.
this could take me a minute still. So I'm gonna go back to 26, page 26, right?
I just
Yeah.
had a follow-up on the last question, if I could get clarification.
Sure, Eric had the floor, but
Oh,
sure.
no, that's fine.
But it's related to Eric's question. So Eric, with your question and Paul's answer, how much of this has to do with the $15 million grant we just received?
I didn't hear that.
So
You
she
want-
wants,
I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
she was asking how much of this is related to the hydrogen grant that we received, the 10 million.
15
The 10 or
million.
the 15 million,
15.
15 million, yeah. Well, the 15 million, my understanding is that that was proposed to be used for bus purchases, hydrogen buses out into the future. So that's listed in that capital schedule in year 2028, with the understanding that some of the meter manufacturers are not even going to put those vehicles in production until 2027. And also the understanding that's a federal grant that typically we've been able to hold open for up to like 7 years. So we do have some time to spend that.
And I should add on the capital projects that all of these still have to go through our annual budget process. So the board will get a chance to see all of these projects listed out individually, and we'll get to vote and decide whether any of these projects are included in our actual budget this does not obligate us to spend that money. These are just a listing of projects that the agency projects it could undertake.
Good, continue.
You're up.
Thank you, page 26 still, we have scheduled to increase our rideshare vehicles by a total of 12 vehicles over the next 5 years. You said we have approximately 40 vehicles in the fleet currently. So if rideshare is predicted to grow by 1% according to section 9 year over year, why are we increasing our fleet by almost 25% in the same period?
So we are looking to try to rebuild our fleet to where it was pre-pandemic. Pre-pandemic, we had over 65 vans in service. Right now, we have 31 in service, and we're putting together a group for our 32nd and final van that is available for service. So we want to build in the chance to have a little expansion each year. And if we go forward and say in 2026, we buy 2 vans, but we don't put them out, then we would adjust our plans for 27 to not buy those 2 vehicles because we didn't put the ones from 26 out. But then this, at least we can list out that our plan is to have capacity for growth in that program. Based on where we were at pre-pandemic, there seems to be an appetite in the public for commuting via rideshare. And hopefully we can recruit a fair number of those customers back.
I'm on page 28 now. So if we're increasing our fleet to more hybrid and hydrogen or the other alternative fuel sources, why then are we projecting that our fuel costs or fuel consumption is going to increase over the next 5 years?
That's an interesting question. I think there's a lot of unknowns there. What would come to mind for me is, hydrogen is probably 5 times the cost of,
Well, it's specifically listed as diesel and unleaded fuel consumed.
oh, okay. Yeah, but you can see that there has been somewhat of a change in the direction of just more current purchases to hybrids.
Mhm.
So, the hydrogen electric is still uncertain quantity right now. So, I think projecting, I mean, this is kind of a blanket projection.
Mhm.
And I think the schedule just reflects a really conservative posture on that.
On same page, curious how vehicle revenue miles is higher than for the rideshare portion. We have vehicle total miles and then vehicle revenue miles is higher. Do we charge differently than actual use, or how does that work?
But
So if you look at rideshare, you have vehicle total miles, and for 2024, it's 401,945. However, the vehicle revenue miles is 402,974.
I think that's a good catch. I think that's an error. I think they should be reversed. Yeah, I'm referencing another schedule. Total miles is always greater than revenue miles, so that's an error, and I appreciate that.
So I apologize, this happened on this before. In looking at this hatch zero emission vehicle transition plan summary, it says that in most cases, recurring costs, operations and maintenance remain constant or decrease. And then over a 12-year vehicle life cycle, the total cost of ownership is expected to increase by 7%. Essentially what we're saying though on page 29 though, is vehicle maintenance is going to continue to go up, and it's almost going to double in the 5-year period. And so I'm curious as to why vehicle maintenance is almost going to double or triple rather. It's going from 2,772,000 to 6,325,000. Why are we projecting that vehicle maintenance is going to be so high?
And part of that, I think we're showing in the detail like 1.1 million for rebranding. I believe that's incorporated in that department.
So
But that's not. for a year.
shouldn't that not be under planning and marketing or something, or as opposed to vehicle maintenance?
That's true. Well, as far as its placement, it is where it is, but I can see where the following years it shouldn't be included. We certainly can remove that as we're projecting forward, so I think that's a good point.
And with that, thank you.
Well, where does that budget line item live? Does it live?
I think, yeah, I think it lives in the vehicle maintenance, but we could move that to.
Are there any other questions? Jenny?
Eric, some of mine, so thank you for that. Page 23 on the 2026 planned activities. Moving the on-demand service level to require 30-minute advance notice. The facilities and equipment, I get all of that and the rolling stock piece of it, but is there somewhere that is representative of a staffing model to move us to that? We're at 2 hours. 2026 is not too far away, and so what is that ramp? What does that trajectory look like?
So part of this is going to involve our projected changes to Camino. So as Commissioners Bacon and St. Clair, I just haven't had a talk with Commissioner Johnson about this, but I have with them. Is that on Camino, there was some services that were recently converted from fixed route over into an on-demand zone. And the public feedback has been that they want the fixed route back. And so we're looking at doing that. One of the projected increases or changes we're gonna do as part of that, the weekends have very low usage over on Camino. So staff is trying to figure out how we can potentially reduce expenses on weekends on Camino by maybe converting the island to an all-demand zone on Saturdays and Sundays, because it would reduce the amount of staff that we would necessarily need. And I see Commissioner St. Clair's reaction to that. I mean, in some cases on Sundays right now, our ridership is in the single digits on some of our services.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I mean, we have to discuss about a wide variety of things. And so that's where in 25, we're gonna have a convert back to fixed route for some of the on-demand services. And then try to look at how we can modify for weekend services. And as part of that change, potentially see what the impact would be if we drop our on-demand requirement from 2 hours to 30 minutes. What does that take for staff? What does that take for vehicles? To do that there would help us anticipate how that would have to work on a weekend or a weekday, and also taking that service from Camino over to Whidbey, it'll help us anticipate the impacts and what we need for vehicles and staff and other changes internally. So we're trying to take a phased approach to getting to this. And 2026, if it looks like we're not going to get to it, then in next year's annual update, we could bump it out. If it looks like that's too aggressive of a schedule.
So based on what you said, is then this particular project for Camino then?
Yes,
not- okay.
that'll be the introduction will be on Camino. Depending on how difficult it is for staff to make that happen, we could potentially roll it out at a larger basis. But it is probably just for Camino at that point.
I'm sorry, I didn't read the project that way. Sorry, that's all. You took all my stuff, dude.
Are there other questions? Greg, Melanie, Janet?
Yeah, there's me. So I am uncomfortable with this in part because we have had so many challenges with the on-demand system on Camino and trying to make it work, that I feel like we're changing things. It's kind of like, I'm gonna just use my sailing metaphor. We're throwing the tiller back and forth without allowing ourselves to pick a course, cutting services to an entire community without clarifying whether we have planned alternatives or whether the changes we made caused the problems, the lack of ridership, or solved the problems. We still have people over here that need to get to work on Saturdays, and to make that an on-demand system when the on-demand system hasn't been fully working as effectively as we hoped, and I know you're working on that, so I want to be clear, I know you're working on that. And now we're gonna make further changes. I think you're moving too fast without allowing things to happen. And it has economic impact on the people who live here, who rely on transit to get to jobs. It's one thing on this, and that's true for Sundays too. But I understand the Sunday service is the one that is the lowest. The other piece is that we know that Snow Goose Transit has been part of what is happening in terms of low numbers. Since the implementation of Snow Goose, we've seen low numbers Monday through Friday, but they don't operate on Saturday and Sunday. So, you know, I have suggested a couple of times that staff reach out to Snow Goose, see where we have duplicative services and work collaboratively to make sure that we address that. What I don't want is to leave our most economically transit dependent folks without an option on Camino. And this feels like you're cutting their options.
So if the board would like, we could push this out further, or we could strike it from the plan. We do call for, in 2025, one of the planning items is to initiate the development of a long-range transit plan, where we would go through a public process, try to develop the services that are needed in the future. The Maximize Island Transit plan was basically a pre-pandemic plan. And we have, usually those are adjusted or redone every 3 to 5 years. So we're at the sort of end of that life cycle of that plan, and it's time to do another, but happy to push that off or strike it for now, at the pleasure of the board.
Melanie has a question, and then Janet, are you asking for that to happen, or you're just talking about a thought?
I'm asking us to slow down on changes until we incorporate a little bit of what the improvements have been made before you start making more cuts. So we have had problems with on-demand. You've been making improvements to on-demand. Let's see what we can do to get those improvements fixed before we start reducing further. So I think it requires more conversation and more analysis. I
Is
feel
that
like
a striking or a pushing it out?
that is, let me finish my own comments, please. And so
I asked you a question in the first place. You didn't answer it. I clarified it. I didn't interrupt you. You stopped. I asked for clarification. Do you want to strike it, Janet, or do you want to push it out? Or
It
are
is
you
not
just
my,
making a
it
general
is not
comment?
my intention altogether. So it is the board's intention. And I'm raising questions and I'm welcoming to see if there's other board questions about this before we go to a decision.
I think the board is just looking for what you want them to consider.
I've said I'd like to slow down the changes, so I'd like to push this out. I've already
That's
said that.
all I needed. Thank you. Commissioner Bacon?
Thank you. I'm going to be booted off here in a second because my plane's about to leave, but we need to pass this TDP today. And so I would look to Brad to tell us what changes we can make in the TDP that would still allow us to approve a document today and still
So-
satisfy the desires of Commissioner St. Clair.
So we can, it's pretty simple for us to slide this to 2028. Or to strike, actually, I would just recommend that we strike it all together and then we bring it back after we've gone through the long-range transit development plan next year, and see what that planning process produces as a timeline.
I think I like that. I don't know, want to push it off indefinitely, but I think I like the idea of making it part of our long-range plan and being able to analyze some of the improvements that have been made. What are the, you know, there's all these factors we haven't had a chance to incorporate to set that. So I appreciate that recommendation.
Yes.
I think the definitions here are vague. And since this is a public document, to read into this looks like more of a global 30-minute on demand. So perhaps consideration to where this is really a project.
Okay.
Are there other questions or comments? Oh,
Yes. Yes, I just want to make sure we know what is being removed from pages at 23. Brad, can you tell us what you're going to be striking here?
So, I would say the motion that the board is considering, is to strike bullet point number 2 under services on page 23. That says increase on-demand service level to only require a 30-minute advance notice.
Thank you.
Can I just ask, are we done with other questions? Sorry. I just had one question on page, whatever. What happens when I turn pages? The page where we talk about buying the ride shares. 26. I have a question, just a general philosophy question, and maybe I'm just not understanding the purpose of the chart. We're not showing any expansion in paratransit on this. We're only showing expansion in rideshare.
Correct.
So our data shows that we are having an aging population that in this trend period will be more dependent upon those types of services.
Mhm.
Why are we not recommending any expansion in paratransit?
I think it's a fleet management issue in that we have a very high spare ratio right now with our fleet for the amount of vehicles we use on a daily basis. And a lot of those vehicles can flex back and forth. And so as this was getting drafted, I believe that the thought was that when we start buying these replacement vehicles for fixed route or paratransit, it might be vehicles that could go in either direction, that could function for either mode, and that vehicles will be moved between modes as necessary over time. I believe that was the fleet management philosophy that was behind that.
Is it based on the same number of routes and riderships? When we're talking about, I mean, I understand why rideshare, but on all these other things, are we talking about the same level of service and a fleet needed to support the same level of service? Or is there an anticipation of an expanded level of service that may require more vehicles?
That's a tough question, and I think part of that is tied up in our leadership transition. Because this would normally be something that an executive director weighs in on and says, here are my plans for the agency over the future.
So I'm gonna interrupt you right there,
Okay.
because I'm gonna have some comments here.
Okay,
First of all, that statement right there is fundamentally the organization's problem. That foundationally is where you have the wheels off the bus, so to speak. It is not the executive director's plan. It is the board's plan implemented by the executive director. So if the board does not understand the philosophy, it's not because of an executive director change, it's because the conversations, the policy conversations, and the investment conversations have not happened at this table appropriately, right? So, and I'm not taking off after you, but I need everybody to hear it. There is no single employee in this organization, executive director or not, that sets the course for level of service.
I would agree with you, ma'am. It
Yeah,
is,
I would too.
it's an executive director that makes a recommendation to the board.
Based on board values and philosophy. So part of what I just watched happen today, are we at the feedback portion? It sounds like we need to pass it, but it's not gonna go smoothly. Partly there are embedded values in here that haven't been vetted by the board. There are embedded decisions in here that haven't been vetted by the board. There was answers to questions that needed to be provided by staff that's not in the room. There are changes from the original draft to this draft without a memo outlining why those changes are happening. We are literally expected today to vote on a plan where we're being told, well, we think it's this and we think it's this. The last time a board here voted on a plan where they didn't understand the details, people lost their jobs because there were embedded costs in there that were glossed over. This is fundamentally an organizational issue about how information is being presented how details are being provided, the clarity of changes that are happening. I mean, I appreciate my tone. I know I have it, but it is because of stuff like this that happens in government, and then things blow up because boards are at the 11th hour being told you have to do this. We don't have the details as to why. We haven't vetted the philosophy as to why with you. You just have to get this done. I personally have a high value on paratransit. It is why I got on this board, actually. And I'm gonna vote on a plan that shows 0 increase in paratransit buses. I really feel strongly that if this gets passes, which it probably will, because everybody's gonna do their job, that nobody should feel good about themselves today. Because this was a poor presentation of details. This was literally trust us, let's go. The public can't comment, they don't understand. We can't comment because we don't understand. There are increases in here from the draft plan to the final plan that are not justified. There is nothing that explains what they are. We're asked to pass a plan where it's like, well, that's a typo. Oh, we'll fix that. I'd like to run your household budget that way and see how you all like it. Oh, we'll get that mortgage. Oh, just a few $100s here and there. My guess is it wouldn't be that comfortable for you to have people making decisions about your personal finances that they didn't understand and they didn't know. And yet we're being asked to do that today. Are there any other comments?
Clarifying question. On the ride share vehicles, are those, you said there's flex in the vehicles. Are the ride share vehicles at purchase kitted out to support ADA compliance?
So
Vehicle lift, wheelchair lift, I just don't know the difference between the vehicle types.
So the rideshare vehicles are minivans, and that's pretty much all that we're purchasing right now. Those generally do not come with ADA compliant, like a wheelchair lift, but those vehicles are available for purchase on the market. Should we get a group that comes in that has somebody in a wheelchair or other mobility device that needs it, then we would go out and we would be obligated to purchase a vehicle to accommodate that, right?
But for the purposes of Jill's earlier question, which was this fall, future inventory on ride share being compatible with paratransit need, those vehicles are not. Is that correct?
They're not, because they're a separate mode.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that I understood
transportation.
clearly. Thank you.
But
So-
you said they flexed.
So between paratransit and fixed route, those vehicles you said, sorry, and I may have given an unclear answer. So we weren't purchasing more paratransit vehicles because the paratransit vehicles and the fixed route vehicles in many cases share a common pool of vehicles. Will, correct me if I go wrong on this.
You're right.
How many vehicles will flex back and forth between fixed route and paratransit?
As of right now,
Yes.
we've probably got 25.
And so, from the fleet management, what's going to happen, because we have a very high spare ratio. Do you know what our spare ratio is right now, Will? Is it above 30%, you would say?
I would say that.
So as demand increases, at least in the short term, we believe that these vehicles that flex between modes, the excess of spares that we have right now, we can convert those out of spares and they'll go into our daily revenue fleet. That's why we're not expanding the paratransit fleet here in the short term. But we do an annual update. And so if we need additional vehicles, then that's where we go. And as I said in the beginning, we can modify this plan. So if we get 4 months down the road and we get a spike in paratransit usage, which could happen, we are obligated under federal law to go out and buy more vehicles and meet that capacity. By federal law, we are not allowed to deny rides on paratransit based on capacity. And it has come up and they have said, if you have to pull fixed route service because you need to provide paratransit service, then that's what a transit agency would have to do.
Sorry, one last comment and I'll shut up. So I think it would be helpful based on Commissioner Johnson's feedback to understand the growth trajectory around, you guys, I know you get sick of me, growth trajectory and staffing models, but that's the world that I live in because I need to understand the numbers. Is the growth potential for our usership in that paratransit segment so that we can understand where we need to get to before they get to us. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Because we know census demographics around age and we can, with a pretty high degree of certainty, understand where those people are going to meet us and then be able to project, this is how many vehicles at this particular time. And I don't see that in here. So
Okay.
that might
Sure, yeah.
be something to study. Is that fair?
That was exactly what I was trying to
Okay.
say. So calmly. Are there any other questions or comments? I think we've lost Commissioner Bacon, so the recommended action is to approve. We have one edit on page 20, was it 6? I should have wrote that down.
23.
23, striking the second bullet under services. A request to enhance the definitions. Do you want to do that now, or you just want to give general feedback for the
I just want
future?
to give general feedback
Okay.
as we go forward.
So we have one strike. There was a typo change.
Page
there.
28.
I should have wrote that down, I was listening. On page 28, between fuel,
Ride share total miles versus revenue miles.
and that's gonna be adjusted. Okay. Okay. Are there any other changes to be considered in adoption?
There was page 29 where the rebranding amount was included in the projecting forward for the next 4 years. And so I'll remove that and reproject that. So it'll be a smaller number,
And you're sure that's what that was?
pretty sure. I'll double check before I take any action. I'm pretty certain.
Well, this is our action moment, so this is, the board's being asked right now to adopt the document.
So Paul, where does that, where would that 1.5 or whatever it
I
was,
think it's
where does that line
1.1
up?
million, I believe it's in that department. That's why it's showing up on that line.
And it's in 2025, and then the future years are probably based on a inflationary projection.
Yeah, we're just projecting as a percentage going across into the future, so that would need to be removed from that projection. So you have a smaller amount rolling forward.
Was there any money spent in 2024 for planning and marketing? There's nothing listed.
There's nothing listed because it was part of 160, and now we've created a separate department.
So the marketing expense, that 1.1 or whatever it looks like going forward, so is, maybe this is cost of call, question for Celine. Is the cost associated with that in alignment with the future vehicle acquisition? Is that how you get to that number? We're getting this many of this type and this is what the cost is for the kit?
The 1.1 was inclusive for all the current vehicles that we have and any kind of other branding materials. So it was supposed to be 1.1 total. And that was assuming that there would be inflation and it would be over a 3 or 4 year period. We're well behind the curve right now for a number of reasons. And, but that 1.1 does not include new vehicles because new vehicles come already branded in that cost of the vehicle.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have a strike through on page, I'm losing track of where I am. Strike through on 23,
Correction on 28.
And a correction on
Section 4,
29.
column 1.
and a correction on which page? Right, so
29.
those are the corrections that the board is requesting happen prior to final submission, so our motion would reflect those corrections. Is there anything else or any other comments? Is there a motion to approve, deny, or delay? I don't even know if that's an option, but those are the board's options.
I move we approve the 2024 to 2029 Transit Development Plan of Island Transit as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Craig, a second by Jenny to approve resolution number 924, the Island Transit 6-year Transit Development Plan for 2024 through 2029 as amended. Is there any additional discussion? Based on the seconding problem, can someone clarify to me what happens if this doesn't pass?
So, I would have to check with state DOT, to see what the penalties were that we would incur if we violate state law. It could be that we are excluded from.
The
the
state doesn't
consolidation.
follow state law, so we all know that, but
It could be that we are excluded from grants for the biennium. That would seem to be the most likely outcome.
with that understanding, is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. Motion carries unanimous. No, motion carries 3 in favor, 2 opposed. We have an adopted plan. Thank you, everybody. With the motion said with the amended changes. Okay. Now we're back on regular schedule, Craig. Next week, our next meeting's our normal meeting.
That's correct.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Declare us adjourned.
We're adjourned. Sorry.